Week 1 of fantasy football is here, and that means that we all have very important decisions to make for our season-long lineups every single week from here on out. In this video, I'll be talking through 5 names who unfortunately did not make my cut for starting lineups this week. These are players that, if you can afford to, should be kept down on the bench. I think that there's some flaws in the situations or the team game script for this week's upcoming matchups, and we're going to dive into all that stuff in today's video for the running back position. So, of course, if you are new around here, make sure to drop on down, click that like button, subscribe to the SFS channel, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. I'll be posting fantasy football content just like this every single day of the week for the entire 2022 NFL season and beyond. So make sure you stick around for that stuff. We've got our wide receivers portion of this episode coming out later today. Maybe I'll drop them at the same time. You never know what I'm feeling here, so keep your eyes peeled for that. We've got our must-starts video that came out on Monday, so go check those videos out after you're done watching this one. But without further ado, let's jump in our first must-sit player for week 1. All right, here we go. So the first name that we're going to be addressing in today's video is David Montgomery, the starting running back for the Chicago Bears. I know there's a camp of people out there that are really positive and optimistic on Montgomery's outlook for this season. He is a workhorse running back. He's had some of the best opportunity share numbers in the Chicago offense the last 2 years he's played. However, this year, things are looking a bit less advantageous, and this week 1 opening matchup for me is a very, very worrisome and troubling forecast in terms of what I'm expecting to happen in this game. If we take a look at sports books for this week, BetUS being my preferred sports book here at SFS. If you guys want to sign up and bet on sports with me this season, you can drop down into the description of today's video and sign up. However, BetUS has the Chicago Bears as 7.5-point underdogs, which is tied for the second biggest margin between opponents this week, aside from the Texans and Colts, which we'll talk about a little bit later. That number is at 9.5 for the Texans being underdogs to the Colts. Obviously, Indianapolis being favored in that matchup. So for a home game against San Francisco, they are more than a touchdown underdog, this being the Chicago Bears we're back to talking about here. So essentially for me, why is this the case? David Montgomery is a workhorse running back in a bad offense. However, the risks that come associated and attached to that situation are very obvious. You get situations where if the game script doesn't hold out in a manageable fashion for at least 2.5, 3/4 of this game, you could see a very unfavorable number, show up in that fantasy football box score for you. San Francisco is just significantly more talented than Chicago, and the other, troubling part of this situation, it's not like they're playing Buffalo where, Buffalo's going to score points on you, but their rushing defense is very weak. San Francisco's defensive strength lines up positively for them against the Bears' offensive weakness, which is offensive line play. San Francisco's front 4, heck, even their front 7, is arguably, the best in the league. Now, you can make your cases for those other teams. I'm not going to do that in today's video. The point and, the takeaway here should be they are very talented up front and, again, are a severe talent mismatch for Chicago's very poor offensive line. Justin Fields got murdered in his rookie season. He's still out there running for his life in the preseason. For those of you who are Bears fans out there, I'm sorry. You can hoot and holler at me all you want about Alex Leatherwood. He's not going to stop the dudes that San Francisco has up front, from Javon Kinlaw to Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa being of the LA Chargers. They've got some dudes up front, Fred Warner in the linebacking core as well. It's going to be tough sledding for the Chicago offense, and obviously, as I'm projecting to be the case here, as they fall down throughout this contest, as the game script gets out of hand, they're going to have to move further and further away from running the football. Additionally, this is week 1 for Justin Fields under a new offensive playbook, so you essentially fire Matt Nagy's staff last year. You bring in Matt Eberflus here for the new Bears regime this season, a new offensive coordinator. That's a new thing that he has to learn, understand, and eventually be able to master here. But week one is not necessarily the time for that, and we can't expect him to just have this thing in this entire offense, all 11 men out there playing at the same time, to have this down to a T. So I personally believe David Montgomery is an extremely touchdown-dependent play this week. I think the only thing that could potentially equalize the playing field here is if Trey Lance really struggles in this contest. That could be somewhat of an equalizer, but I still think that 49ers front seven is going to hold very, very stout here. And again, it's going to take a couple of end zone trips for me personally, in my opinion, to get David Montgomery over the hump here in producing fantasy-relevant points this week, or at least the numbers that you're expecting and hoping for from him out of your lineup. The next player I'm sitting down in lineups this week is Damien Harris of the New England Patriots. Now, some of you might be plain and simple sitting Damien Harris because of your optimism for Ramondre Stevenson. I totally understand that if that's the case. I like the Ramondre Stevenson buzz. I think he's a more exciting player. He's not, the most elite athlete in the world, but he has a really nice size and frame. He can catch the football out in space. I think he has a better use case for being an NFL three-down back than Damien Harris does, but nonetheless, Harris is still widely considered the starting running back for this offense. We expect him to get the early down and distance usage for this team, and that's no surprise here. However, I hate this matchup for the Patriots week one. They are on the road taking on the Miami Dolphins. They are a field goal underdog here, and I'm kind of expecting things to go a bit more south than that. This has been a team and an organization in New England that has really, really struggled against the Miami Dolphins, especially early in September when the weather is hot and humid down there in Florida, and they don't travel on the road well to play the Dolphins. So I'm fully expecting a semi-offensive meltdown this week from the Patriots. We've heard nothing but, bumpy roads and obviously not optimistic reporting out of Patriots camp. The offense has been obviously reported to be a disaster and a struggling mess here throughout the summer. So that in itself is not a positive indicator, especially, again, the climate of this game looks like it's going to be a bit suspect. You've also got a Miami, just a football team in general that has really added a lot of talent to their roster. If those wide receivers get rumbling out in space and get out to a big lead here, this Pats team is not well equipped to play from behind, and frankly, Damien Harris's skill set does not really play to that side of things here. If they start getting into heavy passing sets, that's not good news for Damien Harris. So again, just like he kind of was last season, he did make it work because of his high touchdown production in 2021, but Harris this week especially is a very high and heavy touchdown dependent play. That's not something I like to roll a dice on a week in, week out basis. Maybe he makes it work in standard leagues, but in half PPR and full PPR leagues, he will be far, far, far down in the depths of my bench and nowhere near sniffing a starting lineup spot for this week. Breece Hall. This is going to surprise some players to see on my must-sit list for this week. I have been one of the advocates of Breece all offseason long, someone who's really loved his upside here throughout the season. However, for me, I want to be transparent and realistic with you guys. I want to be honest about my evaluation of players. Week one isn't it for Breece Hall. This is a situation that could become turbulent very fast for fantasy owners. Do not get your expectations and your hopes up for this week. I apologize, I just bumped the microphone. Breece Hall is going to struggle. You've got a situation where they are potentially having to start Joe Flacco here on the road at Baltimore in a game because Zach Wilson's knee issue is still bothering him. It's undecided whether or not he will or will not be the starting quarterback for this game. But the moral of the story is here that you're going to have an undermanned offense for the Jets in a severe talent mismatch, a talent deficit to the Baltimore Ravens. This has been a common theme here in today's episode. And it's not only that, it's the fact that Michael Carter is still a factor and a function in this offense early on in the season. I have talked a lot this offseason, and I will not back down from my stance as of yet, that I do think Breece Hall eventually entirely takes over this backfield. I do think that by the end of this season, he is a three-down workhorse running back for fantasy, and I think he kills it down the stretch of the year. However, in order for him to optimize his fantasy output and to reach his fantasy ceiling, he needs Zach Wilson at the quarterback position. He needs to unlock unlock the full usage rate that the Jets coaching staff is going to allow him to have in terms of just his weekly touch count. Again, week one, it's unrealistic of us to have that level of expectation for him. The Ravens got back a whole lot of players on the defensive side of the ball that are really going to help him or help them in the coming weeks here. Hopefully they can stay a bit more healthy this season. And I think things are just going to be really rocky for the Jets. The Jets are 7.5-point underdogs. Again, that is the team tied with Chicago for the second highest deficit in sports books this week. Again, all bets provided to you guys by BetUS. The link is in the description of today's video. And obviously the expectation here is, and I hope you're getting this point from the things I've been saying, but my expectation is that the Ravens are going to blow out the Jets. I have Lamar Jackson as my quarterback one for this week. I think he just totally slices and dices them. I think it is, again, a totally lopsided affair. And the heavier and the more extreme you get into blowouts in the NFL, the more that destroys the opposing team's run game. It basically forces them to become a one-dimensional offense and pass the football over and over and over again. So Breece Hall is a high-end RB3 for me this week, but if you can manage to just start two running backs, guys who would be in my top 24 in 12-team formats, it would be ideal to avoid him in lineups this week. Before we get into Rashaad Penny here, if you guys want my help and you want extra advice and content from me this season, make sure to scan the QR code in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If you tuned into the videos from yesterday, that QR code was broken. I do apologize for that. It is up and running now. That code will take you over to sizzlefantasy.com, where you can check out our SFS Gold membership and All Access Pass. What that gets you access to is our entire website for whatever structure and plan you choose. And basically, what you get to do is add me as your friend on our community Discord server and send me your questions, your lineup help, and needs every single week. And obviously, for Gold members, I get you guys hooked up with guaranteed responses. I respond as soon as I possibly can. You guys can post stuff in the general chat as well. I'll respond to you wherever you comment, except it's a little harder on YouTube because I can't notify myself for just one person. But basically, you can get me as your personal fantasy advisor for this season. That comes with my weekly lineup rankings for every single position in fantasy football and some other great stuff on there like fantasy articles and such. So go check that stuff out. Another way to get access to that is by using code SFS on Underdog Fantasy. I love Underdog, their prop betting platform, their best ball drafts that they've got on there. They've got weekly games you can play before we get to kickoff on September 8th. You can also play season-long best ball leagues on there. That's my personal favorite. However, those in-game ones are very, very fun as well. Check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, deposit $10 or more, you get a 100% deposit match bonus and that all-access pass through this season's Super Bowl completely free as an add-on for that. So thanks for listening to that, you guys. We are heading into Rashaad Penny here. Of course, all the links to everything I just talked about are in the description of today's video. If you're enjoying, make sure to smash that like button. Penny here is our fourth must-sit player for those of you guys who are wondering why. It is a plain and simple case here, as most of the three players have been so far. Seattle is a 6-point underdog at home against the Denver Broncos. So Russell Wilson comes back to town here. I'm super pumped for this Monday Night Football game. I apologize, I did not put the matchups on here for Penny. I'll toggle back here for a second. I did it for the other players. I apologize about that. He is at home against the Denver Broncos. Penny, for me, there is a couple of ways where he proves me wrong and where he does become a player who's warranted to be in fantasy lineups for this week. However, I'm not so optimistic that things play out in that fashion. The ways that he's able to do so is if he gets the ball checked down to him a high number of times, if he's able to get out in space and be an effective pass catcher for this team, maybe he finds his way into the end zone. Those, of course, are realistic ways that he, again, could become a top 24 running back play for this week. But the reasoning that I don't think that that's the case is I'm expecting a massive and rather aggressive blowout from the Denver Broncos this week. I think that Russ and that team is, again, like we've talked about today in a lot of these situations, it's a severe talent deficit for the Seattle Seahawks. They are well undermanned on the offensive side of the ball. And the thing I just can't get past is their quarterback situation. It is so bad. Geno Smith was a second-round pick back in 2013, and the last time I can legitimately remember prior to prepping this video that he was like actually looked at as a team's week 1 opening day starter and the guy they wanted to move forward with was in 2014 with the Jets. And I actually remember them playing my Packers and they actually were blowing us out early. We came back and won. Who cares? Definitely not you guys. So the point being here is their quarterback situation is probably the worst in the league. I would rather be the Jets and be starting Joe Flacco, a former Super Bowl winning quarterback, a guy who at least has, not that Geno Smith doesn't have a veteran presence, because obviously his maturity and his ability to be a respectable backup has held him down a job in this league for a long time. But in no way, shape, or form should he be a team's week 1 opening day starter with no injuries being at play here. It is such an awful situation. His passing numbers are awful. We'll talk about those specifics in a different video coming out today. Stay tuned for that. Of course, if you guys are enjoying, again, make sure to hit that like button. It helps me out a lot here. I don't like this at all. So, again, if Penny catches check down passes, if he's scoring touchdowns, you're going to be fine here. But the game script, I expect to totally be flipped on its backside here. The run game is going to be a non-factor. This is a team that was 32nd in team pass plays per game last year, so they are a very, very run-centric offense. But Denver's got good defensive personnel. I think that back end is going to lock up this receiving core. At least, even if there is separation, I don't think that Smith is going to be able to, thread the needle and get those into the windows that he needs to make that happen. So I'm out on Rashaad Penny for this week. I'm out on Seattle's offense for this week. I will not be starting my Seahawks here. Maybe DK Metcalf is the exception. But again, not feeling confident in this offense whatsoever. Dameon Pierce here is our final name I wanted to talk through in today's video. Yes, Dameon Pierce made my week 1 must-sit list. Let's dive into the details of why. Of course, this looks like, his draft stock has been erupting as of late. There's been a lot more positive buzz and news for Dameon Pierce here. And as I did for some of these other players, I'll outline how Pierce can basically prove me wrong this week, the ways that he could actually become a top 24 play. That is essentially my basis for building this list. Did you make my top 24? So were you an RB1 or 2 in a 12-team format, or were you not? There are obviously always the situations and circumstances where you get guys and, maybe you're starting 3 running backs, maybe you flex a guy. Dameon Pierce would be a fine flex option for this week. Of course, I would prefer a higher upside wide receiver play, especially in those PPR formats. But let's talk about why I don't like Dameon Pierce and the Houston Texans this week against Indianapolis. First and foremost, we've mentioned it a couple times. They are 9.5-point underdogs at home against the Colts here in the opener. The Colts, of course, being led by Matt Ryan this season. And in addition to that, this Colts defense is a very sound defensive scheme. This is a team that doesn't allow big plays, and they have a very, very underrated front unit. They basically make you earn all your yards. This is a team that prevents the big play, whether that be over the top or letting you get to the perimeter of their defense. They do things to slow down big plays. They make you grind out drives and be meticulous with your offensive approach. And that's not something I feel super confident in the Texans being able to do this week, especially with Davis Mills under center. I'm not a huge Davis Mills hater. I do think he's a solid game-managing quarterback. I just think this is a tough matchup. I think you're asking too much of the Texans under a new defensive regime here. They are going to run the ball a ton. I'll be up front and I'll say that. Dameon Pierce is going to touch the rock a ton of times this week, but I don't think he's able to be very efficient with that. I think he's going to struggle. And of course, the risk factor here, the game script could always get out of hand. Now, that's not to say he can't be productive again. Like I said, with those opportunities comes the chance to score points every single time he gets a carry here. If you're touching the rock enough times, you're going to get an opportunity to touch the ball inside the 20-yard line, and you can make something happen with that touch, potentially make a play. Maybe he gets loose for a run or two here. That's all possible. However, I'm just not super confident in that being the case and being what actually plays out here this week. Again, he is a fine flex option for me, but not someone I'm looking to start as a top 2 running back in my lineups for week 1 here. So, yeah, that's basically what we wanted to talk through here. This is a stingy defense, a good defensive front. I think that the Houston offense will be very inefficient, but again, Dameon Pierce is going to be kind of the focal point of this offensive attack. The one thing I did want to say, I knew I was trying to say something before we got out of here for today's video is my expectations for Dameon Pierce are as such. If you remember back to 2020, James Robinson, undrafted free agent running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, actually really good news from him today. He will be suiting up and playing against the Commanders here in week 1. But basically what happened that season was J-Rob was a workhorse for that offense. That is the same role I'm expecting for Dameon Pierce here of the Houston Texans in 2022. What those two have in common is, again, they are workhorse running backs, but they play for very, very bad organizations. What James Robinson was able to do is have very consistent numbers that season. However, his ceiling wasn't really a week winner. He wasn't someone that was making the difference for your teams. I think eventually Dameon Pierce gets to that point in time. I think when he has solid, 1 to 2 TD production games, he could produce as a top 12 back. I definitely have optimism and hope for his 2022 outlook, so I don't want you guys to panic and think I'm totally out on Dameon Pierce or I'm thinking too lowly upon him here. I really like him as a player. He's a physical runner. He's shown explosiveness in space, and I loved his college tape at Florida. For me, this week 1 matchup is just something I'm going to be a little bit more cautious on here, and I'm going to leave him by the wayside on the bench and wait until week 2 to make further analysis. We'll see how the Texans look overall as an offense and a defense, because that can play into game script and freshness as well for both sides of the ball. So I tossed this out here. I would say overall, if you were to start some of the guys in this list, because I know all of you guys aren't going to be able to avoid these players. It's just the nature of the beast. The deeper, that your leagues are, the more dependent you're going to be on names like these in your lineups. Obviously, a 10-man league is going to be more able to avoid starting some of these names in a 12, 14, or 16 team format. So basically, Dameon Pierce is kind of in the middle of the pack for the list. I don't really put these guys in any particular order, and that's all stuff you guys can see on my weekly rankings for position by position on sizzlefantasy.com. Again, scan that QR code or use code SFS on Underdog Fantasy when you sign up, and I'll get everything set up for you and send you access to the website and your exclusive personalized advice within 24 hours. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate the heck out of you guys for being here. Remember, ask your questions down in the comment section below. As much people as I have time to get back to that aren't gold members, I try to make that happen and get you guys an in-depth analysis and help you out with your teams, because honestly, it's the best part of my day, having fun with you guys and just helping you win leagues, win some money, or just simply bragging, right? So love helping you guys out. If there's something I can do to help you out with your team, put it in the comment section below, and there's a chance I get back to you. Otherwise, if you want that guaranteed response, sizzlefantasy.com, code SFS on Underdog Fantasy. Go check it out, and I'll see you there. Peace out.